Hello, friends. Today is the 15th of February, 2014, the day for us after the Aquarius full moon. Aquarius being a sign of elevation. It rules aviation. It rules the ability to rise towards a kind of perspective that is not so earth-bound. And hopefully, in a sense, this is what we are doing. This is our discussion of simultaneity and sequence, which is, in a way, an aspect of the adventures in identification, hoping to make it more possible for us to realize our identity as something far deeper than we might have expected, not only to realize it and to experience. Perhaps realization is a type of deeper experience. We had we have about 1/3 of this document to go. We're on number 85.85, and I'm just reading this last paragraph that we looked at. Well, maybe 83 and 84 I can read just in terms of bridging. From the dimensionality of all true points is exactly the same. 0. And yet, unlike 0, as a nothing, or as nothing at all, true points exist. Well, they certainly exist, because they are not found in the absoluteness. They are, well, it's hard for there to be anything that's not found really as the absoluteness. But these true points, excuse me, are as if externalized from the absoluteness, and this is the idea of the X, that which has gone forth, ex ist. From one perspective, there is only one true point ever. Of course, that's a temporal word, and I don't know how it's possible to use words that are not temporal, but we hint at ideas that there is a non-durational state and non-temporal state. There's only one true point ever, and all the infinitude of true points, given that there are an infinitude of universal true points, so however many points within that infinitude are also infinitude as well, even if there should be a finitude of true points within any one universal true point or universe, there still would be an infinitude of true points. Well, an infinitude and yet one. That is what I'm trying to say. There is only one true point ever, and all the infinitude of true points are exactly the only one true point. And I'm calling that, what I'm speaking of here, is the one ultimate true point. The sum of all true points within an infinitude of universal true points, which are also summed. Well, these concepts, I suppose, lie beyond realization, but there may come intuitive flashes which give something of the truth, which I believe lies behind these statements. Of course, it's one thing to discuss this in the mind, and quite another to take our sensory, our sentient, our mental experience and apply what is here said to those contents of consciousness so that they are seen under a different aspect. We might say under the aspect of eternity, perhaps, or we might say under the, we always see them within the veil of illusion, but within a light of greater truth. So we hope to transform our usual perceptions into realizations which are quite different than what our usual perceptions convey. That is what we hope with this. That would be the practical result of living with, of studying somewhat, of meditating upon thoughts such as here are proposed. So let us explore a little more in detail. I'm saying that time is, in one sense, a dimension, and any true point is dimensionless. Well, if you think about time and you look at our solar system, for instance, even though within the solar system a particular cycle was exactly the same for a long series of moments, the solar system itself will have moved as a whole progressively in time. And so even that which is the same with respect to the contents of the solar system will be different because of the time elapsed in the movement of the solar system. At a different time, the relationship of a particular item in the solar system which did not change its relationship to all the items in the solar system will have changed its relationship to items outside the solar system. So what might look like rotary or repetitive motion when subject to the dimension of time changes in the general context of relationship. Time, we have been told, is in a sense a dimension. There is, we can move along a temporal axis apparently, and any system is different at different moments of time. Although, as I said, the system may appear to be the same within its own context, once the temporal dimension is added, there is a change between the system as it was in one time and the system as it is in another, simply because of moving along the temporal axis. So let us explore a little more in detail. Time is in one sense a dimension, and any true point is dimensionless. Well, right there we have a problem, because the things that used to, as it were, take time, those things being true points, do not then take time. So then what? If all that we think of as existing through time are actually true points, then there is no dimension of time occurring within them. So I'm saying a radical thing here, and remember, I'm not speaking of how things appear, or how we experience things usually, or how we have to deal with the contents of consciousness maybe forever. Maya is forever, says Shankara. I'm saying there is no such thing as a measurable point in time, nor is there any measurable point in space. Well, this flies right against our normal perceptions, because our normal perceptions tell us that there's a point in time and a point in space. You know, we We have a location in space, a certain point. When we try to locate our position in space, we say, well, we're at this point. It's as if it's something real and measurable. So there's no point in space, and even maybe harder to grasp is there's no point in time. Little flickers of intuition may sort of glance off the brain, to use language that is not accurate but may be suggestive. So a true point is non-locational and non-extensional, as well as non-durational. Well, the first two ideas refer to space, location and extension, although we try to locate ourselves at a point in time, so maybe the term location can apply both to space and time. A true point is non-locational and non-extensional, where virtual points actually have some kind of measurement, like the dot on a page, as well as non-durational. Points do not last any particular, do not last in time. So I'm saying points have no temporal dimension and no spatial dimension. They have no length, width, height, and they have no duration. And yet they are. Well, that tells us something about, we as a being, we think we have duration in apparent time. We think we have a certain location on this planet. Where are you? Well, you look at the planet and you, as if from a distance, say, well, I'm in this country, I'm in this city, I'm in this neighborhood, I'm in this house, room, etc., location. But the extension or extendedness or apparent extendedness of what we are has been collapsed into a point which has no dimension and no duration. Then we're saying of ourselves, in a way, because we always want to bring it back to home, of ourselves, that we have no extension or duration. And any other true point. See, I think it helps sometimes to look at measurable things, apparently measurable things. I always have to use that word apparently measurable things, as true points. So there's kind of a fellowship of true points operating throughout this apparency of universe. And that's what we all have in common. Every measurability that you can cognize can be understood as a point. Well, all real points are true points. I'm not talking about virtual points. In other words, as if this computer in front of me could be collapsed down to a tiny point, which could somehow still, even in the nano world, be measured. I'm talking about an immeasurability. I'm talking about being faced with all manner of immeasurabilities on every single apparent dimension. I'm talking about kind of an ultimate, penultimate reduction. As I said before, I think the penultimate reduction is to reduce all measurables to true points. And the ultimate reduction, is to reduce all measurables. Why doesn't it want to give me that? Measurables, maybe if I put this kind of thing, because it's one of those words that maybe really doesn't exist. So reduce all measurables to absoluteness, which is the pointlessness, because it has no specificities within itself, at least in the realm of reality, but in the realm of illusion, all the finitudes are forever consummated in it. So I want to repeat that then in another way. All finitudes are forever consummated are forever consummated in absoluteness. Absoluteness. Which means that they are consummated now, or now as ever, now as forever, now as ever. Okay. Well, we'll get maybe used to this language. We will see whether we can really withstand it, and whether it points to something which we consider to be real, even if not easily appreciable. What we want to do is to take our common experience, and when experiencing that, to sense this substratum. The word sense is not correct, but to somehow register. Maybe that's a better word, because it doesn't confine us to the realm of senses. To somehow register this substratum and register the identicality of all measurable things as true points. I want to distinguish between what I called authentic beings, authentic beings in cosmos, and true points, because I think there are many measurables which are combinations of authentic beings, but they are not authentic beings themselves. And by authentic beings, I mean that which the universal logos, the manner in which the universal logos intends to enumerate himself, the number of emanative subdivisions in which whatever, seeks to self-objectify. So, let's see, authentic points. Well, authentic beings. The beings result from the willed enumeration of the universal logos. Or maybe I better call it willed self-enumeration of the universal logos. And then, of course, then additionally, there are combinations of true points, or combinations of not true points, but authentic beings. But perhaps this little idea is more for the infinitization book than it is for this discussion, in which I am emphasizing the existence of a non-durational simultaneity, speaking in temporal terms, forever, that in a way is the substratum of our temporal, durational, extensional, spatial experience. It's really hard to avoid duality here when you're using words. We know that all these contents of consciousness, though illusions in the sense that they veil the irreducible, are themselves naught but the irreducible. There's nothing but the irreducible, but there's the irreducible as it is, and then there's that which seems to be other than the irreducible, but which is the irreducible. All of us are, God is, we are the irreducible. But we are, our consciousness in this emanated state has not fathomed our irreducibility. I guess we're going to, the higher initiations, we're told, are given in symbols. Words can be symbols, of course, but they also have some quite concrete meanings, and we're going to have to evolve a language in which these dualities and concretions do not so often suggest themselves, and thereby veil the unity. Now, going on, and I've probably said what I want to say a number of times. I've in a way said it before I got to the part of the document which says it. So maybe in the part of the document that says it, it's better said, but I am allowing the flow of thoughts to come forth, for better or for worse. Well, since the intervals between universes, let's see, if I were to go to the, not the Drudge Report, for heaven's sake, if I were to go over here and eternal parent, I'll just look it up, not the eternal patent, that'd be pretty good, 7 eternities. Let's see if I get anything. Oh, the parent is space that is eternal, ever present. The 7 eternities meant are the 7 periods, or a period answering in its duration. Blavatsky Net Theosophy. Here it is. The eternal parent, wrapped in her ever-invisible robes, had slumbered once again for 7 eternities. Well, it says time was not, but that's inter-universal time, intra-universal time. If you have something slumbering for 7 eternities, you have a term of time found there immediately. We have some pretty strong time space. I think I'll get rid of the Drudge Report. Don't you think so? We have some pretty strong time space terminology there. Of course, what's presented in the Secret Doctrine is presented by a human mind, and a very advanced human mind, and it was written by maybe even more advanced human minds. I think, as I understand it, Master Kutumi supervised the wording of these stanzas to make sure that they were properly worded in English. Maybe that's occult hearsay, but I do recall it being said in a fairly authoritative manner. I have a friend who memorized a lot of this, and so did I. But, it's use it or lose it if you don't stay with the memorization. But when you do memorize it, it does something to your consciousness. Some people will say it does something bad, but I think it sensitizes your consciousness to these great ideas, and it sort of cosmifies your consciousness in a way. But anyway, when you slumber for 7 eternities, that's a unit of time. And I'm trying to speak of timelessness, or trying to give a rationale or justification for its existence. So since the intervals between universes are hypothetically measurable quantities of time, such as 7 eternities, I'll put that down there, such as 7 eternities, and since all quantities of time, apparent time, are really dimensionless points with with dimensionless points with 0 dimensionality, then there is no real quantifiable, measurable interval between universes. Now that, when you say that, you seem to fly right in the face of the Secret Doctrine, and that's the last thing I want to do, but I think there is a sense in which anything written for man has to be written under the illusion of time and space, or under the spell of illusion. And remember, illusion extends a long way. I'm even calling the universe the Mahamaya, the great illusion. That's not how we mean it in a practical sense, because we're just talking about rendering the mind of man less subject to illusion. But I think Master D.K. said that until the ninth initiation, illusion prevails. It's kind of interesting, the ninth initiation, the number 9 associated with the third ray, and the third ray so connected with illusion. So maybe we go beyond the spell of that kind of illusion at the 9th degree, which for us is just words, of course. So the intervals between universes excuse me, are hypothetically measurable quantities. Why use a number if it's not measurable? 7 eternities. And since all quantities are really dimensionless point with 0 dimensionality, though they exist, though these points exist, there is no real quantifiable measurable interval between universes. Well, okay, fine, then we could say, well, okay, universes follow one another without interval, but that's not what we're saying either, because we have another problem here, that the universes don't take time either. No time elapses. That's one of our principal ideas here, that no time has ever elapsed. And that seems to contradict the whole idea of time. And in a way, there is no real eternal duration, unless you measure the ongoingness of the absoluteness against illusory sequences. As I talked about the frictionless state, in some of those relativity explanations, if a rocket ship is traveling and there's no friction, you don't know it's moving. There's no sense of movement at all. There's no friction. Well, maybe a kind of friction occurs when absoluteness is placed side by side with relativity, relatedness, time and space. The friction, the friction between, I want to kind of put that down as an idea maybe for future development, the friction between absoluteness and time and space, or sequence, which has its time-space component. So let's just say that we have these definite units of time, 7 eternities, apparently, as seen under the aspect or under the spell of illusion, because wherever you're dealing with multiplicity, you are, in some sense, however subtle, under the spell of illusion. So, while they are hypothetically measurable quantities of time in universe, in illusion, but since the quantities are really dimensionless points with 0 dimensionality, taking no time at all, then you can't say that there's really an interval between universes. But it gets worse than that, because if universes, well, let's go on and see what we say here. If universes are not separated from each other by any unit of time, that, i.e., by any temporal boundary whatsoever, like, let's say 7 eternities separates this universe from that universe. We have a kind of a span of 7 eternities, which is the boundary between, the temporal boundary between successive universes. So if universes are not separated from each other by any unit of time, by any temporal boundary whatsoever, for all units of time seem to have temporal quantity, then these universes are not distinct, but are essentially superimposed upon each other, or shall I say, as each other? As each other? So maybe it would be better to say, yeah, that the universes are superimposed as each other. The infinitude of universal true points is essentially one ultimate true point. And it's not like they, butt up against one another as if they have duration and there's no span between them, because the universes have no duration either. Universes have no temporal dimension, just as the so-called just as the apparent intervals between universes have no temporal dimension. So what we're faced with, we are faced with an endless, infinite, well, how should I put it? A beginningless, endless sequence of universes, apparently separated by units of time called eternities. This sequence occurring in no time at all. All time has been robbed of the apparent sequence. Well, talk about counterintuitive, because everything tells us that when there's a cycle between A, B, A, B, A and B take time. They don't happen all at once, and yet I'm trying to say they do happen all at once, at least on the level of reality per se, and not on the level of apparency, or under the spell of illusion. See, in a way, illusion is everything other than that. Well, I know we can't really speak of that. What I said before, well, I used to think, well, you can't say anything true of that, but then, it may be equally so that you can't say anything false of that either. If it is the fount of all possibility, and if everything that ever could be has been forever consummated, is forever consummated as that, or in that as that, in the only now that ever is. See, this is a bit the story of Moses and the Promised Land. Maybe Moses is the mind. He never got to the Promised Land. He wasn't allowed to pass into the Promised Land. God did not give him that permission. But the mind, which sets up the vision of the Promised Land and may speculate about it, doesn't get to go to the Promised Land. So much of what is being said here is setting us up for the experience of the Promised Land without being able to travel into it through the instrument which sets up the possibility of travel, or at least motivates the experiencer to want to enter the Promised Land. So all these words, I'm not saying these words are the Promised Land. They are like the finger indicating that there is such a thing. And how we get there then is another matter, but having some of the thoughts about the strangeness of the promised land and the illusory nature of all that is familiar brings us into a position where we may more readily enter the promised land. You know, some of us folks, I don't know. I said in the earlier presentation that it could be a disadvantage to be born into the Jewish group, as I have been, and as my very brilliant friend has been, and you know, a number of billion people. Maybe, you know, we come from that earlier solar system, and we're into the mind very much. But the mind is not the experience towards which the mind is meant to point. The mind is Moses. And in this transition from the third ray to the second ray, from the, let's say, from the third subplane of the monadic plane to the second, from the emphasis as the third ray monad into that of the second, there's much work to do, and not to remain trapped on that third subplane. And maybe as you read some of the stuff that I'm talking about, you say, oh, well, this is a guy that's really trapped on the third subplane of the monadic plane. But at least I have a healthy respect for that which lies in the promised land, towards which all of, or this kind of thinking points. And maybe, you know, to be born into the Jewish group, or to be one of the, I almost said monads, but maybe I should have said nomads that come from the previous solar system, one can expiate a lot of the karma in that karmic clearinghouse, which might stand in the way of more immediate perception. But one uses one has what one has, and one uses what one has to enter dimensions which are more fulfilling. And of course, I'm still speaking in relativistic terms. How else to do that? If you speak, I'm sure you're in the realm of relativity automatically. So infinity, said Aristotle, cannot be traversed. There's a good book by Moore, G.E., is it A.E. Moore? Anyway, it's called Infinity. And I found it a very nourishing book. I can't say I understood all of the mathematics in it, but I got the idea about the mathematical infinity and the, well, I might call it more the philosophical infinity. And in that book it talked about the Aristotle's view of the non-traversability of infinity. Well, you know, at any definite point you can reach any other point, but there are just no final definite points in an infinite sequence. Every starting point of any journey towards the moment we call now, no matter how remote in the past may be that starting point from the moment we call now. Let's go back a Google universes ago, or a Googleplex universes ago. I called them you-agos in the Infinity book. Well, it's a definite point, but and you could, and you know, you could reach this point in sequence by continuing to, quote, move through time. But any such point, unfortunately or fortunately, will be preceded by an infinitude of former potential starting points. Always. You can find no point in an infinite sequence of alternating ABs that is not preceded by an infinitude of potential starting points. So, you know, there is no final remote starting point from which one can reach the present moment across time by moving, as they say, through time. Because always there will be a point from which one still could have proceeded. It's as if, okay, you It's as if one never began the journey. It is as if one never began the journey to the conventional now, what we call the present moment. You know, you can never look back and say, well, I began it then, because you've been doing it forever. So if you think you've traversed infinitude, just looking back over your shoulder and there's an infinitude of infinitude you have not traversed. Always more. So how did we ever reach this point in time at all? That's the big question. Well, apparently not through the normal manner of traversing and moving from one thing to another. I know we have to think in that term, and we certainly do move from one moment to another, and maybe it appears we move from one solar system to another and so forth. But there is a problem with such movement if it's part of an infinite series of such movements. You know, we've always been on the move, in a sense, always. And always is a hard concept to contain within the finite mind. The other alternative is to get rid of movement altogether and just deal with it as if it is an apparency but not a reality. So every starting point of any journey towards the moment we call now, no matter how remote in the past that starting point may be, to the moment we call now, will be preceded by an infinitude of formal potential starting points, and that's always the case. If you define a starting point, you've finitized your sequence, to the present moment at least, not to the infinitude of points that lie ahead. So if you define a starting point, you have finitized the sequence, SEQ, the sequence between that starting point and this now, which is always on the move, but we can historically, in a way, say, well, this is the now we're talking about, because we define the now as a moment in time. But we can't define a starting point. No starting point, no ending point. And so the question comes up, well, how did we ever reach any point at all? See, you can ask if any moment, in any conventional moment, was preceded by an infinitude of potential starting points, how did we ever reach any moment at all? It's as if conventional moments are unreachable through sequential action or movement. And, you know, infinity is the most mind-boggling of considerations to which the human mind may apply itself. And it just is filled with paradoxical conclusions. So from this perspective, it is impossible, colloquial speaking, to sequentially traverse infinite time. Well, as one traversing cannot skip universes, you have to go from one universe to the next, from one exhalation, which is a universe, to the next. Inhalation, exhalation. You can't jump ahead because it's all occurring rhythmically, apparently. So we just cannot sequentially traverse infinite time and successfully reach the point in time we conventionally call now. So I just want to make a statement. All conventional nows are unreachable through sequential movement. And yet, everything, the immediacy of our understanding tells us we are here now. Always. There's never a time when you exist as a human being when you say, well, I'm not here, and it's not now. Here I am. How did I get here? Well, apparently not through conventional movement in time, step by step. So I want to say in this way that gradual movement never reaches the conventional now. So conventionally considered, any point in time, no matter how far in the distant past, is forever preceded by an infinitude of points in time. And in this conventional consideration, we're ignoring what we've been talking about, the possibility of quantitatively measurable points in time. We're just speaking conventionally here. You cannot reach any point because you cannot traverse the infinite span which preceded the point. And yet here we are. And yet, speaking colloquially, here we are in the common language. Sometimes it helps just to speak in the common language because it helps to relate these rather abstruse considerations to our everyday experience. And we do want to learn how to improve the illusion, perfect the illusion, archetypalize the illusion. We do want to improve apparent conditions. So here we are, and every point in time which has ever been has been somehow reached, and yet even though it's unreachable by the method we're talking about. So if, as the secret doctrine implies, every universe has been preceded by another universe. So let me say the paradoxical thing. Every conventional point in time has, say, every conventional preceding point in time has been reached, and yet is sequentially unreachable by traveling gradually through apparent time. So whatever universe there has been, it has been. And all that within that universe and the being of the universe is experiencing something, and yet it's impossible to reach. It's impossible to arrive at any present point in conventional time using the sequential method. Well, this is, needless to say, problematic. We know we are here now, and we know that tomorrow comes, and we will reach tomorrow, and the next solar system comes, and we will apparently be there, whatever there is, experiencing it. And this universe will dissolve in the Mahapralaya, and another will come forth, apparently, and there's only one experiencer, and there we will be. So I think we're running into mind-brain limitations here. Because we're such tiny creatures, we cannot embrace the entirety as if it was one movement or maybe no movement at all. But we're just seeing things in constant apparent movement, and in occultism time is related to the sequence of those experiences experienced by limited human perceivers, or any limited perceiver. So this problem of the non-traversability of an infinitude of universes, because of the absence of any definite starting point, can perhaps only be solved by realizing, how do we solve this? Okay, at least how do we solve this in a way that satisfies the mind, even if it doesn't make sense to our common sense, even if we can't relate it to the normal types of experiences we have. So this problem of the non-traversability of an infinitude of universes, because of the perpetual absence of any definite starting point, with every starting point preceded by an infinitude of potential starting points, can perhaps only be solved by realizing that there are no measurable points in time. It's another one of those radical statements. In a way, it's like saying there is no time. There are no measurable points in time. You can look back and say something took place then, but if between then and now there are only ciphers, then is not then is now. If there are simply non-dimensionalities separating a previous moment from the present moment, then the previous moment is the present moment. So each such point, apparent point, is quantitatively a cipher, a non-dimensionality. In fact, we shall seek to show that there is only one perpetual, non-durational point in time, the eternal now. Now, of course, I have to admit, and you'll know it's true, that talking about it is one thing, and experiencing the eternal now is something very different than the talk. And of course, what we're looking for is not a lot of words that indicate that the experience may exist, but the experience itself. So in fact, we shall seek to show that there's only one perpetual, non-durational point in time, the eternal now. And it really shouldn't even be called a point in time. A point in time is a conventional term. Apparent temporal point, perhaps, because it's not a real point in time as that term is usually considered. So all true points, not just conventional or virtual points, not just conventional or virtual points. All true points are non-dimensionalities, and so not only do the apparent, that's my saving word, isn't it? Because it tells us that we are viewing it under the aspect of illusion. Or should we say that it's being seen rather than being. In other words, it's what consciousness reveals rather than what being is. So not only do the apparent quantitative intervals between universes have no temporal duration, but universes themselves, as universal true points, are also non-dimensionalities and therefore have no temporal duration. They are, at least they are revealed to consciousness. Okay. But they really do not really last. They do not really take time. You might say that the AIU is the, well, let's just say the AIU takes no time. It's almost as if that which takes time is a bit of a theft, you know, but the AIU is non-durational, absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization. So I began by saying, well, the intervals between universes are non-dimensional, temporally non-dimensional, so they take no time, and now I'm saying that universes themselves take no time. In a way, what I'm saying is that although the great breath is a tremendous actuality and the archetype of all time and space, from the point, well, here words are going to be hopeless, when dealing with the perspective of what may be the state of the absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization, when dealing with that, then this great sequence of the great breath, which is the archetype of all time and of space, is not really existing. In other words, it is reducible. What did I say about reality? Reality is irreducible. And if something is reducible and is more essentially something else than what it seems to be, then it's not real. It's actual enough, it's necessary enough, but it's not real. So what I'm saying here, you know, and just even though it's counterintuitive and goes against what our senses and our human experience appears to reveal, I'm saying that a universe takes no time at all, that only seems to take time from this perspective of consciousness in illusion. Remember how I kind of devalued consciousness in relation to being. Being is primary. Consciousness is secondary. However necessary if God is to experience aught else than God. Well, you know, we will transcend ourselves and our present limitations, but we have to learn to think our way out of this ring past knot, which binds us to conventional perception and cognition. Well, probably many ways to get out of that ring past knot. Like I say, you know, you can break through, you can dissolve it. Maybe you can find a way to just keep expanding the ring past knot through the power of adventuring thought. At least you can stretch the radius of your thought. So a universe, I'm saying, takes no time at all. Really. I really, you know, I should always add that because obviously it does, apparently. It only seems to take time from the perspective of consciousness in illusion, and I probably should, that should be almost like a capital because it refers to the whole universe, doesn't it? Except when you're using this kind of consciousness in illusion. And the apparent quantitative intervals between universes also take no time at all, they only seem to take time. Well, we're going to have to live with time, but let's just say, what I want to say is time and space are reducible to that which I call reality. So people might say, well, look, your definition here of reality is just really too harsh, too strict. You're taking all reducibles and you're saying they're unreal, and you're saying that only the unreducible, non-reducible, is real. Well, so many things seem to be themselves and are really, when reduced, something else. So that is how I'm looking at what is ultimately real, and which is not to say that in a certain foreverness we have to deal with the presentations of the Mahamaya, which again, of course, are only the real, essentially, however much they seem not to be this very strange thing that I'm trying to talk about, the real. We have to learn to think of time as an apparent actuality which is unreal. It may be the very substance of our limited experience, but still unreal. So time and space may be the very substance of our limited, our limited life experience. But they are not finally, ultimately, irreducibly real. In other words, something's going on, something's happening, it's not really happening, something is, which is not time and space. Something fundamentally is, which is not time and space. And I don't just mean which is not time and space. I wonder if I can get T and S. I wonder if I can do that. I'd like to be able to do that. T and S. I'd like to get this so I don't always have to write out time and space. So something fundamentally is which is not time and space. And I'm not just talking about very limited conceptions of time and space. I'm talking about the whole universe as time and space, and even advanced conceptions of time in universe and space in universe. I'm including those too. There's something which fundamentally is, which is not that content of consciousness, even of universal consciousness, we call time and space. Remember, in a way, time precedes any universe, and a universe is usually considered as occurring in time. The archetype of time and space, or that which produces what we call time and space, is the great breath, which has been, and that's perpetual motion. That's been breathing forever. Sometimes I wonder whether, we're not going to have to just settle in searching for the utter unity, whether we're not going to have to settle for a perpetually presented duality. The experience of duality is not, or of non-duality is not something that someone can finally solve and escape forever, because this dualistic experience is built into the great breath. And there's only one being who's going to emanate into all kinds of sub-emanations which in their self-limitation are not going to experience complete non-duality in apparent time. So the experience of non-duality is apparently cyclic. It's not like we can suddenly, one of us that we call a human being, can suddenly save himself forever from the experience of time and space. or from the experience of duality. We say, well, a great man, a great individual has now no longer subject to time and space, but who is that great individual? That great individual is fundamentally the one being that has many emanations and is simultaneously experiencing time and space and duality while not experiencing time and space and duality. Well, the mysteries are deep, and the human mind is not yet, I think, I don't just mean my mind, but I generalize that the human mind is not really ready to solve all of this. And, as I said before, I wonder if it can be solved. But, of course, that's the human mind speaking from its own limitations, saying, I wonder if this problem can ever be solved. So even the question is born of limitation. So the following dramatic implications emerge. I said it earlier. No time has ever elapsed or ever will elapse, really. Time only seems to elapse. So all of this infinite, eternal sequence, which is apparent in consciousness, maybe I put in a new word, sort of like AIC, that's actuality in consciousness. So I'm going to change this to APIC. Okay, I'll call it this way. Apparent in consciousness, APIC. See if I can do that. Okay. Turns out to be handy to be able to do some of these things. APIC, APITS, apparent in consciousness. So all of these experiences which are apparent in consciousness, they will be with us forever, and to consciousness, this concept of extension in time exists. Apparent in consciousness is extension in time. Extension in time, an infinite sequence. Well, maybe I should just say more easily, extension in time is apparent in consciousness, but not real. And I don't know what good it does for us to tell ourselves, well, look, no time has ever elapsed, really. Because time is a cipher, kind of a zero, an existent zero. It might bring us into a certain ability to live in the eternal. There is a peace that passeth understanding and abides in the hearts of those who live in the eternal. There's a power that maketh all things new. It lives and moves in those who know the self as one. Which is, sort of the application to initiation, to the third initiation in a way, because that particular mantram has a lot to do with the third initiation. So if we can begin to live in the eternal and know the self as one, then our experience of life is entirely different, and it's desirable. It's much different from the limited condition in which we now live. Well, okay. So with the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, we must assert that change is seemingly forever. And remember what Shankara said. Shankara said, pretty close to this, Maya is forever. And yet there is no real time in which real change can occur, and no real space in which real spatial change can occur. Spatial change. Oop, wrong one. Okay. So the appearance of change, changing time and changing space, is forever. The appearance, or maybe cyclically forever from another point of view, the appearance of changing space and changing time is cyclically forever, but not real. So we get to some of those paradoxical statements, which is found in the ancient spiritual writings, that the universe has never arisen, and that it's all a great Maya. But of course that seems to dismiss the Maya, and I want to advocate for the Maya. I don't think that it is ever dismissible. It simply has to be seen for what it does not appear to be. It has to be seen for what it is, dealt with, improved for those who are still under the spell of the Maya, but seen for what it is and not for what it appears to be. The impression of change is an illusion born of the finite consciousness of the finite perceiver. Well, we can say, we have such limited minds, that limited perceptual apparatus, that, we're going to be always seeing change. I've sometimes wondered, what is it that knows there is a great breath? What is it that has seen there is a great breath? Is it that finitization of the absoluteness that we call the universal point, the universal logos, who knows or has seen that there is the great breath? Because there is the experience, I suppose, of disappearing. The universal logos must have the experience of being absorbed into that. Of course, that would be a cyclic experience, and that would assume the reality of time and eternal duration as normally considered. But simultaneity really is a paradoxical thing. I used to think that, I called it radical infinitism, was quite a philosophy, I thought, but I would say the philosophy of, I'm going to call it this, radical simultaneity, is hard to understand. So I wonder if we can carry the thought that not only is it all happening, but it's all happening now forever. Maybe there are interludes in our common experience when we can repair to that, the sense of that allness forever now, or the one and only thing forever now, just for kind of a refresher out of all time and space, kind of a recharging of the essential identity. I'll call it that. Occasional, I'll call it this, recharging of the essential identity may be a good thing. May be spiritually refreshing. So those moments when we might be able to those apparent moments, when we might be able to realize that there are no moments other than now, may help us recharge the sense of our essential identity. We're all in this together as each other, only some of apparent us don't know it. And there'll come a time when we all know it, and we all know it as one being, again. Or maybe we always do. We can't help but speak in terms of time, as I said, and time is the substance of our daily experience. Even the planetary logos has a time-space schedule. So the essence of all apparent spaces, I guess I'm being careful with that word essence. The essence of all apparent spaces is superimposed upon, not sure of the English here. I could say all spaces are superimposed upon each other, but the essence of all apparent spaces is superimposed, well, hopefully you know what I mean. Maybe I'll figure out a way to say it. Space is perceived as extension. Extension is apparently measurable and quantifiable, but all measurabilities and quantities are really dimensionless true points, which I'm calling ultimate negligibilities, or ultimate infinitesimals, and true points are not measurable and quantifiable. I'm trying to keep blue from blue and blue from red distinct, because red is what I'm putting in now, and blue is what I put in before. So it's as if all spaces, really, the essence of them, are related through superimposition. All spaces are superimposed. Now that's not an experiential superimposition, because in experience, here is here, there is there, and things take place at different times, in different spaces. But there are no different spaces, essentially, and there are no different times, essentially, and the one infinite essentiality is happening now or is forever now. So space is perceived as extension. Extension is apparently measurable and quantifiable, but all measurabilities and quantities are really dimensionless true points, ultimate negligibilities or ultimate infinitesimals, and true points are not measurable and quantifiable. So I'm saying, space and time are not measurable and quantifiable. Space and time are not measurable and quantifiable. So, going on, there is but one ultimate temporal true point, and I hesitate to use the word temporal in this context, and that one ultimate temporal true point is the now. Really, now as forever, now as ever. There's but one ultimate temporal true point. Now. It's non-dimensional, and it's occurring in no space at all. It is non-dimensional and occurring in no space at all. We have to get used to the idea that what we consider to be space is just a condition of consciousness. What we consider to be time is also a condition of consciousness, and every once in a while perhaps the timeless, spaceless awareness or the sense of timelessness and spacelessness may descend upon us. So all the many, many points, true points, and all the many, many universal true points are all superimposed in time, and all the many apparent spaces are simply one space and really no space at all. They're all superimposed. A point, a true point, this one ultimate temporal true point, or how did I put this? One ultimate true point or one ultimate temporal true point, contains all possible points and has no spatial dimension, so it's really nowhere, and no temporal dimension, so it is nowhere in time. So it has no spatial dimension, so is nowhere, and no temporal dimension, so it is nowhere in time. Maybe there's a better way to express that, but one should almost, pause and just reflect on that. We have to get rid of the idea of the where and the when. Those are relative terms. So something in our awareness, whatever, should be working on the annihilation of the sense of where and when. Not in the practical world, of course, no. We need constantly the where and when in order to handle the actuality, which we forever must do. But something in us, some form of registration, must help us annihilate where and when. Nowhere and, can we do this? Nowhere and, I know there's no such word, but I want to say it, no when. No when. Oh my. Nowhere and no when. Add to the dictionary? Well, maybe it's already added. I like that. No when. No, nowhere sounds so familiar to us, doesn't it? Well, we're nowhere. I'm lost. Where am I? Nowhere. I have no point of orientation. I have no locatability. But what about no when in time? I'm no when. I know these are nonsense words, but they may convey something to us which increases the understanding and the experience that is beyond the conventional. Another shocking implication arises. I'm shocked every time I read these things. Of course, I've been kind of discussing these things, and they come to me at different apparent times, and I mention them, even though maybe I would have been wise to stick to the system, but I didn't. Another shocking implication arises. It is impossible in the great apparent sequence of successive universes to, as it were, move off the absolute now and onto another moment we call now. Wow. I'm as if reading this for the first time. It is impossible in the great apparent sequence of successive universes to, as it were, move off the absolute now, which is, anyway, dimensionless. As if we could move from one now to another now. It's not possible. And on to another moment we call now. That absolute now has no duration whatsoever. Time at the point has no dimension, and it is the ultimate point. It's the, what did I call it? One ultimate temporal true point. That is, in a way, the absolute now. That absolute now has no duration whatsoever. Time and duration belong to perception in illusion. And I wonder, I want to make an attempt here. Perception in illusion. I'm going to change this. P-I-L. I'm calling this perception in illusion. I'm going to change it slightly. Perception in, and I'll capitalize illusion. Perception in illusion. Okay. The absolute now has no duration whatsoever. You can't think in terms of passing moments. Time and duration belong to perception and illusion, and as Master D.K. is telling us, time is the plaything of the masters, and I'm simply saying it, time is the plaything within the Mahamaya, the great illusion, which is everything apparently other than that. So it's now, 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 now. You can't move off the now. You can't move, because movement requires difference from one thing to another, and there are no other things. So it's as if one long tone is sounding, has ever been sounding, and there's no difference. It's all the same tone. Of course, that implies extension in time, but you get the idea that there's just no change. It's impossible, then, for it ever to be anything other than now. This great, all-time consuming now. It is impossible for the, quote, moment to be anything other than the, I'm going to say this, all time consuming now. Because all time is devoured in the now. These are pictorial ideas in the now. So, shocking implications. Can we carry these thoughts in our consciousness? And if we do, how will it affect our experience in everyday actuality, which is not going to go away, never has? Remember that point, the one ultimate true point, may be always now. Well, implications begin to dawn, but I will leave you to your own implications here. Maybe one day I can fill out some of these more remote implications. For me right now, they would lead into levels of complexity that I don't want to deal with now. So all time is devoured in this now, and remember, we're nowhere, no when. I like that, this is something I've discovered. Nowhere, no when, and I'm going to make this an abbreviation. If I may, I know I seem probably quite mad at this point, but I'll just call it NWNW, nowhere, no when. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. So, as I emphasized in the infinitization of selfhood, all perception is, hypothetically at least, that's how I saw it, really self-perception, and that self being the ultimate non-perceiver at first, and then the big change is that it suddenly, in no time at all, self-perceives. Or if we want to be a little more local and stay within the universe, we'll call it self-perception with just one capital S, which is always less than self-being or self-being. As I say, what I've been saying here is that perception, consciousness, is always much less. How much less? A great deal less? Infinitely less than self-being or self-being in the universe. So that's a whole other idea, that basically we are all what we appear to be, or what we really are, is the great self observing itself in detail. But since it's such a homogeneous being, you wonder how it can be in detail. And yet somehow all of the infinite detail is contained in the homogeneity. So we come to the realization that sequence is a seeming. Now, you know, there's just certain principles that we have to come to if this little discussion is going to achieve its goal. And a few simple things may arise out of all of this meandering thought, that sequence is a seeming, a perceptual actuality in illusion. P-A-I-I. But not a reality. This, of course, has huge implications for our realization of reality. So I like illusion capitalized, because then it seems to have the universal association. P-A-I-I, and I will replace the old one. Sequence is a seeming. S-I-S. Sequence is a seeming. And I wonder if we can live the seeming while being the being. So can we live the seeming whilst being the being? Can we do that? It's kind of a cross in a way. Because, you know, people who just say, well, I'm forever in the non-duality, and they become ineffective in the illusion. We don't want to become ineffective in illusion. So for those who can live the seeming whilst being the being, that is the goal. Because the illusion is eternal, that Maya is forever, says Shankara. And you can ask yourself that. Can you do that? You know, as you're going through the inevitability of ordinary experience, ordinary at whatever level of universe you may be, there's always an ordinariness at whatever level of universe. Can you be the being? Whilst can you be the one and the many simultaneously? Well, let me put that down. Can you, I, we be the one? Well, how shall I do this? I'll just put it, one and the many simultaneously? Can we be the timeless and the durational simultaneously? Can we be the spaceless and the locatable simultaneously? It kind of takes that dual life of discipleship and really takes it to the limit. You know, we're supposed to be in the world, not of the world. That's how we're supposed to live. Live as the soul, which is in its own world, but also as the personality doing what must be done. And this takes it up maybe as far as it can go. So can we be the absolute and the relative simultaneously? Well, you're only the absolute, timeless, only the being, only the one. But when we live in the normal way, we think of being that type of life. So maybe the word be is not precise. Live the seeming whilst being the being. Be the one and the many simultaneously. Be the one and live as the many. Be timeless and live durationally. Be spaceless and live locatably or spatially. So maybe that's a little more precise. Be and live. Two types of activity. Well, you can't really call being an activity. It's a different aspect of divinity. Maybe it's really foundational, in fact. Maybe it's the point within the triangle. All right. This means essentially that all universes are superimposed in essence, but not in experience. So, there still is actual variety, is what I'm saying here. There. Okay, let's see if I can get this. There still is actual variety. Not real variety, but actual variety. So universes are superimposed in essence, but not in experience. Universes occupy no space. And essentially all transpire within the temporally non-dimensional now. Additionally, all universes transpire within the one ultimate true point. Within, and have no spatiality. Universes in point are non-extensional. So the transpiration of a universe takes no time at all, occurs in no space at all, really, even though it seems otherwise. We're very used to living the life of seeming, but what would it be like to live the life of being, or to be being? Because even though these universes are all superimposed in essence, there may be like an infinite variety of experiences going on within that great superimposition. So within the one ultimate true point may be an infinitude of apparent experiences. I'll kind of write that down so I don't forget it. Within the one ultimate true point may be an infinitude of illusory or actual experiences which seem to take place in time but do not really do so. Well, maybe, probably what would be necessary is to take any one of these little sentences or a fragment of a sentence or phrase and think of it, ponder on it, meditate on it for a long time. But what begins to happen is an energy change, I think. A change in the sense of being and the change in how things are perceived. That's all that any of this is good for, anything that I'm writing here or talking about, to change our registration of things. We can't change our being. Being is changeless. But that much lesser thing called consciousness can be changed, and Just the way the Mahamaya is forever, so consciousness is forever. The Mahamaya is forever, and so is consciousness. And without consciousness, we don't have the Mahamaya. So, without consciousness, no Mahamaya. So, going on, there is therefore no point in time to reach. You know, like how many universes ago with 7 eternities for each interval, and maybe a universe itself lasting 7 eternities, add it all together, on and on and on, each one of them being a point in time, but there is no point in time to reach because time has never really elapsed or ever will. The sense of sequential progression is of consciousness, which is infinitely less than true being. I like that. True being as absoluteness is infinite essentiality, ultimatization. I'd like that to be true. Well, if it's true, it's true, and if it's not, it's not. But I'll work on it and see. At the moment, it seems that it could be true. So the sense of sequential progression is of consciousness, which is infinitely less than true being as absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization. So there's never any point in time to reach. There's never any universe to reach. There's no reaching. Put it like this. There is no reaching because there is no movement. Because movement requires variety. And movement, there is movement in illusion. Let's see, no real movement, but, well, that, I'll do that one, okay? MIL, oh, that's the monad extension. Let's see, so MILL, MILU, no, MILI. Well, movement in MIIL. That'll do it. All right. I know you must get tired of me with these abbreviations, but I'm just, what can I say, saving time. Movement in illusion. So, there is no real movement, is what I'm saying. And it maybe harkens back to Parmenides and Zeno, proving that there's no movement. Well, there's no reaching, there's no movement. There is this suchness now. SN, suchness now. And that's, I think, what the Buddha was trying to, one of the things he was trying to convey. Of course, he made it so extremely practical as a Taurus individual would. So, there's no point in time to reach. There's no other place to reach. Because time has never really elapsed. And every once in a while, you know, something can come over your consciousness which collapses everything, down to a point which is a negligibility in itself. It may be very fleeting, but it will, as it were, it's an aperture to something much different than the conventional illusion in which we live. So from this perspective, just as absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization has absolutely infinite apparent duration in the absolute now, apparent duration, so does the one ultimate true point last apparently forever in the absolute now. Well, these words seem to contain contradictions, but one must ponder the idea of now as forever and now as ever. So this is another radical statement, really, that from this perspective, just as the absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization has absolutely infinite apparent duration in the absolute now, this homogeneous ongoingness, if I can use so cumbersome a phrase. Okay, so say homogeneous ongoingness, so does the one ultimate true point, which is a cipher, dimensionless, but existent, and containing all experiences of all universes simultaneously, last apparently forever, along with the absolute now, or it really has to be in the absolute now. It's as if you have nothing and that something called a point forever. You have the no thing and the something forever. Well, this is a really different perspective than I sometimes offered in infinitization. You have the no thing and the some thing, which is the one ultimate true point, now is forever, now is ever. That's it. So from this perspective, you kind of wonder, well, does the point ever really disappear? Well, in a way, the point doesn't even exist. Well, when Shankara said Maya is forever, that's quite a statement from somebody who basically is trying to teach us how to escape the Maya, or see it as something other than it is. Is it the snake? Is it the rope? If we look at the rope and think it's a snake, it's just an error. It's all the time the rope. Maybe you get into more trouble if you look at the snake and think it's a rope. But that's his ongoing analogy. So, from this radical simultaneity, radical simultaneity, you have the no thing and the something now. And it's just not a question of cycles, of no thing, something, no thing, something. If you increase those fast enough and the intervals get less, sort of at infinite speed, so to speak, they are superimposed. So no thing and something, it's as if they are forever superimposed with something not really existing. Something is irreducible, no thing is not. We have to look at it that way, I think. No thing is irreducible. I'll just use normal words. Irreducible, whereas something is not irreducible. Okay. The no thing and the something. Well, I comforted myself in the other book by really emphasizing this alternation: something, nothing, nothing, something, nothing, something, or no thing, something, no thing, something. But they're getting closer together all the time. Next thing you know, they're on each other, taking no time at all, and in no space. And they are the same thing. So maybe this is another way of saying that Brahman and samsara are one. Samsara is the point. And all of the actual experiences within the infinitude of true points contained within the one ultimate true point. And Brahman is Brahman. It's that, it's all those other things. It's the no thing. I don't want to ever call it the nothing, or just the conventional zero, because it is the infinite plenum, containing all. So there are many philosophical, metaphysical problems which need to be solved if we believe that there is any merit or truth to these thoughts. And I'm sure that There will be some among you, dear reader, listener, viewer, who say, oh, nonsense to all this. There are problems. How can there be apparently time and space and really not time and space? How can there be extension in time, extension in space, and no movement whatsoever? Well, I don't think that the normal reasoning mind is going to solve this. It's going to have to be more of an experience. I used to call it an inperience. It's all taking place within one thing, one being. And there's really nothing else, nothing X to experience. It only seems so. But maybe experience is the easier word to deal with. So there are many philosophical, metaphysical problems which need to be solved if we believe that there is any merit or truth to these thoughts. Attempting to understand an infinitude of simultaneously occurring universes which seem sequential to consciousness in illusion is one such problem. What I'm going to do, again, I seem to want to make that illusion bigger than it is. And I bet you think that's true. So, consciousness in illusion is CIL, and I'm going to replace that. So this is a problem. An infinitude of simultaneously occurring universes, which with each one of which seems sequential to consciousness and illusion, and each one of which contain and which altogether which altogether contain an infinitude of experiences is one such problem. In my infinitization of selfhood, I dealt with many philosophical problems which arise from what I call the philosophy of radical infinitism. Maybe a subset of that is the philosophy of radical simultaneity. And now that my thoughts on these matters have progressed, or hopefully seem to have progressed, or well, hopefully, far more serious problems arise, and they are probably insoluble in my present state of consciousness. And I say our generously, our present state of consciousness. But this cross of simultaneity and sequentiality, this is maybe if the cross all comes down to the point and the point disappears, maybe we have a solution. The one ultimate true point, I'm saying then, which is all the universal true points and all the many true points within any universal true point, and because all the many points are one, the one ultimate true point may well be perpetual, forever, in the absolute now, which seems a contradiction, of course, because you can't talk about forever and the now. Like forever is like the extension of many, many nows, an infinitude of conventional nows. But just to try to collapse this paradox, I call it forever in the absolute now. Now is ever, and now is forever. Those are paradoxical phrases, really, if you think about it. So maybe this one ultimate true point may be called a point of perpetually simultaneous self-objectification. Forever at the same time, and what's going on is that the infinitessence is self-objectifying in this point which is forever, or this point which is always now. So this point, this this one ultimate true point is somehow containing infinite self-objectification, whereas the absoluteness is the infinitessence, which is the very essence of all that self-objectification. The infinitessence is the essence of all this infinite simultaneous self-objectification. It's like we, the I, the Absolute, would not know, we can only be. We can't know what's going on in us unless we self-objectify. But then to place any kind of limitation upon the infinitessence is contradictory. All of this is supposed to radically change who we think we are. That's the main point of it all, while still preserving the ability to keep living a normal and useful life. That's what we are trying to do. And admittedly, you know, a kind of duality is required in our present condition to be in two states of registration simultaneously. I don't want to say two states of mind, I want to say two states of registration. Somehow impressed by the great homogeneous that, and somehow registering all the multiplicity which occurs when that self-objectifies. So, a point of perpetually simultaneous self-objectification. I wonder if I could make that into a some kind of abbreviation. I have a passion for condensation here, and I'll just say a point of perpetually simultaneous self-objectification. What is that? PUPSO. Point of perpetually simultaneous self-objectification. Okay. So if this is the case, we would have to deal with the potential non-durational nature of the slumber of the eternal parent. The eternal parent, wrapped in her ever-invisible robes, had slumbered for 7 eternities. Had, even that is like past tense. You know, we're told we're not supposed to talk about the eternal parent or the absolute, and yet whoever it was that wrote the stanzas from which the secret doctrine comes did just that, in a way. So if this is the case, we would have to deal with the potential non-durational nature of the slumber of the eternal parent. 7 eternities? No, no time at all. If the one ultimate true point is an existent temporal cipher, it's not zero, and it's not nothing, it's existent, and its temporality is 0, then intervallic duration, required of the slumber, you know, between universes, the eternal parent is sleeping, then intervallic duration would also be non-existent. The slumber, as all else quantifiable, such as the duration of a universe, would be an actual but illusory event in consciousness. It seems like there's a 7 eternity slumber. It's actual, but it's not real, and it's an event in consciousness. And then, the consciousness of what? I say, who is it, or what is it that is conscious of the great breath? I'll just put it down as a problem, because it is a problem. Whoops. I like that, though. Okay, so let's just say this. What is it that is conscious of the great BR? I'm going to do this. Great breath. and GBR, I suppose, huh? That's the way it will look. Oh, it has to be done this way. Sorry. Okay, so great breath, and I'll call it GBR. Great breath. So who or what is aware of the great breath? Can the ultimate be aware of anything but itself? And as awareness is such a secondary thing, being only itself is the most important. That's primary. But ultimately, if there's any awareness at all, it is of the Absolute, because there is nothing other than the Absolute. Anyway, I'm asking, what is it that is conscious of the great breath? So, enlarging upon what we might call the doctrine of the point, the absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization is pointlessness, a homogeneous, ultimatized essence. A homogeneous, ultimatized essence. The infinite essence, right? The infinite essence. It's just the mostus, it's the maximal state. So, that's another phrase for that. Homogeneous, ultimatized essence. And yet, it's the great paradox in a way, because somehow it contains the articulation or differentiation of an infinity of apparently sequential universes, but ultimately simultaneously registered universes. So it's homogeneous and, in another way, responsible for ultimate diversification. So the beginningless, endless sequence of universes is an apparent sequence of universal true points, which collectively is really but the one ultimate true point forever abiding in the eternal now. And such sentences as this appear to have contradictions in them, but it's the best I could express it. We've been doing so much talking about it that maybe now some of the statements that are simply here in blue can more or less simply be read, maybe. The beginningless, endless sequence of universes is an apparent sequence of universal true points, which collectively is really, well, should I say really there? I guess I want to change this slightly. I want to say really, because we're still here dealing with the realm which involves the illusion of sequence, but is really but one ultimate true point, forever abiding in the eternal now. Now is forever, now is ever. So what have we done to that sequence? Have we simultaneated it, made it simultaneous? I'd like to condense the words, but they're so awkward. We've collapsed an infinite sequence into the one and only true point, which is next to nothing, or next to no thing, infinitely next to no thing. So close to no thing as to be no thing, except that it doesn't seem to be. The ageless wisdom tells us that Brahman and samsara are one, which is like saying, okay, the one and the many are all one. Brahman is the pointlessness. Samsara is the universe as Maya, as Mahamaya. Maya? Mahamaya. Oh my goodness. Is my Mahamaya? Oh, there it is. The universe as, did I mean to say Maya? Mahamaya. The universe as Mahamaya. Samsara, the universe as Mahamaya, is finally the only one ultimate true point, consisting of an infinitude of Mahamayavic universal true points, essentially superimposed upon each other, but as I repeat, each containing, I don't like that word, but I have to use it, containing, a huge diversity of experiences. And maybe the experiences cannot be superimposed upon each other, they're apparently different, but in essence they are the same. Brahman, not Brahma, but Brahman and Parabrahman, virtually the same thing, the one reality, is the pointlessness. And the samsara, the universe as Mahamaya, is the only one ultimate true point, consisting of an infinitude of Mahamayavic universal true points essentially superimposed upon each other. Well, ponder on this. Advice to myself, this apparent self. Brahma and samsara one is like saying that the pointlessness and pointness are one. Okay, and I might as well say that before I forget it. This is like saying that pointlessness and pointness are one. The boundless immutable principle, which is absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization, is also forever immutable and, importantly, essentially indivisible. Because division is a kind of mutation. If you start enumerating that which is the no thing, you don't have the no thing anymore. Essentially indivisible. Divisibility is an actuality in consciousness, which is an actuality in illusion. Okay, okay, actuality in illusion. Right. I'm going to make sure that illusion gets its proper capitalization. AIL and actuality in illusion. So, there's an indivisibility in this ultimate reality, and divisibility doesn't really exist, but it actually is, or it actually exists. Let's say divisibility is not really. Actuality exists. Divisibility exists as an actuality. So it's an actuality in illusion. Okay. So given these hypothetical postulates as who is to prove them, can it be, I like that, can it be, this is when I'm questioning myself about some possibility which seems to me really hard to understand or to recognize as true in immediate experience. Can it be that the entirety of absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization is found as every true point? Not experientially, of course, but really. In other words, when you're, this means that when you look at the fragment, okay, when you look at the apparent fragment, you are seeing or experiencing the wholeness of the indivisible whole. So in other words, infinity in a grain of sand, eternity in an hour. Blake, the great mystical artist, poet, infinity in a grain of sand. That he was really onto something there, because the indivisibility of the infinitessence means that no matter what actual particle you seem to be seeing or dealing with or registering, you're seeing the entirety. Now, that's a huge contradiction, because, the part is not the whole. But what we're saying here is the part is the wholeness of the whole. And yet, of course, doesn't seem to be. What it seems to be veils what it really is. So let's put down here that the apparent part is really the wholeness of the infinitessence. Really. But what it seems to be veils the infinitessence. So can it be? I like this. Can it be? I think I'm going to use that as an abbreviation, if you don't mind. CIB. Well, maybe you do mind, but anyway, can it be? And I even have a can it be that. Can it be that when we confront any true point, we are actually encountering the indivisible reality of absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization? When I ask, can it be? Well, the postulates that I've proposed may lead, when reasoned upon, in that direction, but obviously I can form no definite conclusions about absolute infinitude. But I have some, possibilities being offered here. Can it be? So, when you're, to the great mystics, everything they see is God. Every part is the whole. So, like this, can it be that every part is really the utter wholeness? And this idea I did have in infinitization, but of course it fits better with this collapsing of time and space that I'm emphasizing here. So if so, essential oneness is completely inescapable, no matter what may be the conditions, diverse, suggested to consciousness, within the limited perceptions available, quote, within any true point, be it man, God, the universal logos as true point. So essential oneness, even though it doesn't seem to be present in the veilings of the parts, cannot be escaped. So this is a statement really advocating non-duality. In the real inescapability of non-duality. But really, you are it, even if you do not know you are. And that's a really different way of looking at our common experience. Because the tiniest UP, ultimate particle event, in actuality, then becomes the infinitessence, the absolute infinitude. So basically, what's happening here is that, well, of course, what I'm saying is the ultimate infinitesimal becomes the same as absolute infinitude. They're no different. But in actuality, they are entirely different. What comes out of all this is really God everywhere. Being, well, nowhere, no when, everywhere, every when, but everywhere, every when is different from nowhere, no when. I had a friend, wonderful cancer doctor. You know, some of you knew him. His name was Finn Anderson. He, for 35 years or more, he ran a specialized clinic for treating cancer in an alternative manner in Denmark. And meanwhile, he had done a lot of translating of some Bailey books, and you know, really a disciple of Master D.K. And he read. He started looking through my infinitization of selfhood, and he told me that on the basis of this book, that I was certainly certifiable, which meant, of course, that I could be certified as insane, so I should be hauled off to the loony bin. Now, maybe on the basis of this, he wouldn't just say that I was certainly certifiable, he would actually take me there himself. But, you know, whatever far-out thoughts one may have, one is not exempt from living the practical life, because the one and only true point, the one ultimate true point, is with all of its infinitude of experiences, now apparently occurring simultaneously, but appearing to occur in extended time, is the absoluteness. So you're always dealing with the absoluteness. The ultimate infinitesimal, and the most ultimate, well, there's only one ultimate infinitesimal, but the universal true point, or the one ultimate true point, is the ultimate infinitesimal. And it's always present, nowhere, no when. And we, the I, the ultimate being, are compelled always to deal with it, even while being entirely and absolutely what we are. I guess I'll give up on words pretty soon. This is all coming to an end shortly. I suspect that any true point is really a special case, then, of absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization. So basically, any specifiable quantity is apparently, well, is it a special case? In a way, yes, because we say, well, it's really that, but or part of that, which is, but when you're dealing with indivisibility, you can't talk about a part of that, it's the whole of that. So even more radical is to say that it's not a special case of that, it's that in its fullest infinite nature, always and entirely. So, you know, this is a real argument for non-duality, but of course it's the experience of non-duality, which is what we long for. And even now we could be having it, of course, on some level where we are all in all. But in our dimensional sealing away from that state, We have to bring something of that state into our immediate actuality. So, it's another one of those good reasons for reverence for life. No matter what you're registering, it's all this being, which doesn't excuse us from having to deal with whatever we register relativistically, because there is good and evil according to the design of the universal logos. And we are obliged, even though we are the ultimate, to carry out our own self-engendered purpose. Which makes me want to say another thing, which is kind of a little crazy, but points generate purpose. Well, universal true points, out of the universal true points comes the particular universal purpose. Of course, it is in the ultimate anyway, but for practical purposes, this universal logos as a universal true point, each one of them is or generates or conceives or is in essence some archetypal pattern which must be actuated in self-observation or self-reflection, or what did I call it? Self-perception. Actuated in self-perception. Because all things within that point are self-perception. Emanations are self-perceptions. They are differing self-perceptions. I dealt with how I felt emanations occur in the infinitization book. And they're all acts in consciousness, really. They are sequential reductions of perception. That's what an emanation is. Sequential reductions in self-perception. Okay. So I suspect that any true point is really a special case, and even the whole of absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization. We must remember what was earlier suggested. All that could possibly be, well, maybe I better not use that full be, because when I want to say like be in universe, all that could possibly be is forever consummated in absoluteness now. Absoluteness is ultimatized perfection. Now as forever, now as ever. So it's like this is sort of the the ultimate example of the one and the many. This is the ultimate. In universe, in any point, there's the one universal logos and the many that are the emanations of that universal logos. But this is the ultimate, that the one and the infinitely many, that the great absoluteness is the homogeneous one, and somehow is self-objectifying in the eternal now as the infinite many. Or the absolutely infinite many. So let me kind of put that down, that the one absolute infinitude is simultaneously, well, in no time at all, self-objectifying in the absolutely infinite many. And I don't know if I've ever said that before, and maybe this is going to be one of those things I'm writing and saying that I'm really going to regret writing and saying. But as I say, if it comes to me now, I'm laying up thoughts for future contemplation by myself, or maybe some who are exposed to this will be contemplating these things. The absolute infinitude is simultaneously self-objectifying in the absolutely infinite many, which is all about this idea of every possibility that could ever be being forever consummated in the absoluteness now. So I think here there are some thoughts which bear pondering. Remember that all of this has to, in the practical and real world, affect our consciousness so that we can fulfill the ancient statement, I am the one, I God. I am the form in which all forms are merged. I am the self in which all soul, I am the soul in which all souls are fused. How's it go? I am the one, and in that one all little lives remain. I am the life, and in that life all little lives remain. So it's meant to affect the quality of our everyday life. And if I would fail in having this kind of thought affect the quality of my everyday life, then all of this has been for naught. But it's quite a bridge to make between the absolutely non-relative and the apparently relative. So whoever thinks in these terms has a big job to carry out in time and space. So, going on here, but since the completed collection of universal true points has not yet occurred in apparent experiential time, it does not seem possible that these points of self-objectification all gathered within the one ever-sustained one ever-sustained ultimate true point will ever contain the unvarying consummation of all possibility in absoluteness now. This one's hard. I can call this lack of containment perpetual incompleteness in illusion, contrasted with perpetual completeness in absoluteness, infinitessentiality, ultimatization. Well, it will seem. I mean, our future universes already somehow gathered into the one ever-sustained ultimate true point? Are the experiences of future universes already gathered into that? Now, since they have not yet elapsed in the illusion of time, we could say that only that is gathered into the one ultimate true point which has seemed to occur. But these others in the future have not seemed to occur. So are they gathered? And yet, all is forever consummated. Every possibility is forever consummated. So maybe the future, well, this is, okay. So let's just say that maybe future universes, all future universes have forever occurred in the now. And the seeming that they have not yet occurred is just one of the limitations of the sequentiality to which our consciousness, normal consciousness, is subjected. Has all forever occurred. Now, has all that could occur already occurred in the simultaneous presentation of all possible universes. In the simultaneous presentation of all possible universes. Well, in actuality, it can't seem so, because we have to have our past and our present and our future. And in the state of being in universe, or in the consciousness of pointness, the future has not yet occurred. But in, can I call it consciousness? Well, I'm going to just have to call it consciousness. Consciousness within the absoluteness. There's so many words I could use. Within the absoluteness, all of the future, all of future possibility, and I mean all, has forever now, quote, occurred. So while we're having the experience of being on that linear infinite sequence, an infinitude of experiences apparently lies ahead, and yet they are already forever fully experienced or lived through, or every possibility fulfilled. They are all fulfilled forever now. So this is another big contradiction, apparently. So much to come, and yet, and how can we say it? An infinitude of universes and their experiences, infinitude of universes and their experiences, yet to come, and yet already forever fulfilled now. Plenty to chew on there, I suspect. The tremendous implications of these issues must be explored, as they are destructive to our usual patterns of thought, which is maybe why my friend wanted to sign the papers. Who's laughing? Okay. But it is our usual patterns of thought which hold us in illusion, apparently, because, the real, what we are really, is not held in illusion. But what we seem to be is in illusion. In the trumpeted words found in Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 2, page 285, a solution is held but not explained. And I think, in light, this has a beautiful simplicity, and you'll say, well, why couldn't I have been as simple here? But, well, I just couldn't be. But I think in light of what I've tried to develop, and this dual theme of simultaneity and sequence, and the collapsing of sequence, I think when you read this or listen to it, it will help, what I've done may help interpret it a bit. It will be more real, because it's possible, I think, to read these words many times and still not bring the fullness of them home. Just reading them, okay? God is. The Lord for A stands firm. Being exists alone. Naught else is. Time is. Being descends to manifest. Creation is. Time, then, and form agree. Being and time do not agree. Unity is. The one between comes forth and knows both time and God. But time destroys that middle one, and only being is. Space is. Time and space reverberate and veil the one who stands behind. Pure being is, unknown and unafraid, untouched, for unchanged. God is. Time, space, the middle one, with form and process, go, and yet for remain. Pure reason then suffices. Being cries forth and says, untranslatable, death crumbles all. Existence disappears, yet all for remains, untouched, immutably the same. God is. Well, you wonder how anything could be more beautiful. So succinctly stated. And of course, this God is not some personal God. This is the absoluteness, the infinite essentiality. Whatever I have called it, the ultimatization, that is. And other things appear. But it is stated that being, true being, and time, and I would assume space, don't agree. They're just of different orders. And they seem to contradict each other. And somehow one has to make the synthesis, or in the words of Master Moria, to contain them. That's when the word contain really is useful. This is the whole universal process. How things emerge and appear to emerge anyway and are destroyed. And after it all's over, God is, and everything is just as it was, forever. Cyclicity still seems to be here. I'm taking a little more drastic approach. But we do know that the the contents of consciousness, or the great phantasmagoria, doesn't affect in the slightest God. That's all of existence. Those are aggregates, and they de-aggregate. Death does crumble all aggregations. And existence does disappear, but nothing has changed. The infinite essence, in my words, is exactly as it ever has been. Meanwhile, our process in time and space, and under the spell of illusion, goes on. So certainly we can grasp this idea. The idea here presented, it's supposed to be the great presentation at the time of the third initiation, and is the seed of all philosophy. So sometimes, just to preserve a little simplicity, I come back to these 6 trumpeted words and realize that most of what I'm trying to say is to, in a way, clarify these trumpeted words. I've taken the matter a little further because here it doesn't seem to it affirms some of these intermediate states like time, unity, and space, and so forth, but then they all disappear as if they were not, and only the fundamental remains. It's as if the first stanza of the secret doctrine, or the first fundamental, abides, and all other things are secondary. And somewhere I think I've discussed these six. If I haven't, I should, but maybe in this discussion enough has been said to give the idea time, space, the middle one, go, and yet they remain because they're noumenon, that which they are within the infinitessence remains. So it's as if nothing that ever could be or exist in the outer world is unreal, because God is those things, but their forms disappear. And we do need pure reason. I mean, he's telling us, well, if we can't achieve some degree of Buddhic consciousness here, or even beyond, we might as well forget about trying to interpret this. This God is, time, space, the middle one, with form and process go, and yet they remain. How can you explain that? How can you deal with the paradox? Well, we need something of the Buddhic consciousness in order to deal with the paradox. So going on, and of course hesitating to leave the elegant simplicity of those six statements, but going on, all movement, change, experience exists fundamentally within the realm of illusion. The realm, at least hypothetically, is the one ever-sustained ultimate true point. But in a way, let's just say, the noumenon of all these factors, movement, change, experience, forever remains exactly what they are in the ever so. Another of my names for the absoluteness. Okay. Within the ever, forever remains, let's see what, in the ever so, or the absoluteness. So experientially then, to the consciousness which has not yet realized itself as absolute being, I sometimes wonder what consciousness really can. As I said, there are are there infinite intensities of this realization? Or are there just a huge number of intensities of this realization? Some people say man can realize everything. I don't think man, as the kind of emanation that he is, can realize everything with equal intensity to say how a solar logos or a galactic logos or whatever can realize. But they too are true points, aren't they? If the universe itself and the universal logos is the universal true point, then all of these huge beings that are lesser are also true points, to be subsumed in the one true point. So experientially, to the consciousness which has not yet realized itself as absolute being, that only one true point seems to appear and disappear. The cyclicity, the cyclicity which is part of our experience in illusion, our consciousness in illusion, our experience under the spell of time and space. But as the intervals of time are essentially non-existent, I don't know whether to capitalize that E or not capitalize. Essentially non-existent, there can be no measurable changes, such as appearances and disappearances, except in consciousness. So everything that deals with the realm of change and with quantity and with relativity and relative quantity is occurring within the realm of consciousness, but not in the realm of absolute being. Although its noumenon there resides forever as ever. So I propose, foolhardy that I am, that consciousness is derivative of being and always reveals a singularity which is infinitely less than what absolute being is. Now, maybe this is too bold, but I have said that, infinitely less. Consciousness is derivative, arises from, derivative of being. Something has to happen in the unhappening for consciousness to arise. Immutable being has to mutate for consciousness to rise. Another apparent paradox which could be pondered. I propose that consciousness is derivative of being and always reveals not infinitude but some single perception, which is like a point, which is infinitely less than absolute being is. I propose the consciousness of absolute infinitude. This sounds like infinitization. I propose the consciousness of absolute infinitude thingifies absolute infinitude. That is, if we attempt to have consciousness of it, and is infinitely less than being absolute infinitude. This is speculative, of course. I think, the ultimate experience here, or registration, or words lack, is being absolute infinitude rather than being conscious of absolute infinitude. Consciousness of absolute infinitude it makes it into a unity. It seems to put a limitation upon it. Whereas being absolute infinitude is the ultimatization of experience. So I'll kind of put that down. Being absolute infinitude is the ultimatization of experience. It would be enough to be conscious of the absolute infinitude, but it kind of thingifies it, kind of limits it. I think the whole realm of the whole realm of relativity is due to consciousness, and does not resemble being as being. So anyway, whether the details are all there or not, and they're not, I'm saying that in that fundamental trinity, it all starts with being. And being collapses within itself anything that consciousness could reveal. I think it's better to be something than to be conscious of it, is what I'm saying, in simple words. I'd rather not. I can be conscious of something, but there's still a separation. And to actually be the thing of which you are usually conscious is more, is a major intensification of the experience. So, being the infinite essence, rather than being conscious of it as if it were something else, and even when you say, well, it's really myself, and I'm conscious of it, I even identify as it, to actually be it is the ultimate. Is it possible, can it be, then, in seeming contradiction to the relationship between the first two fundamentals of the secret doctrine, that pointlessness and pointness exist forever now, and are really the same, as all is the same? But we do have that functional point, providing us with the experience of illusion. But we know, or we seem to be knowing here, that they really are the same. I have before differentiated much between pointlessness and pointness in their alternation. But one is as it is, now forever, and the other provides the Mahamaya. Pointness provides the Mahamaya, but of course pointlessness is pointness. Pointness provides, or is, the Mahamaya. But pointlessness is the ultimate origin. Except, as we realize, we can't really differentiate pointness from pointlessness. We can't differentiate anything from the absolutely undifferentiable. So it seems that experience is one thing, suggesting the cyclic intervallic appearance of pointness, and reality another, although I just say that from the point of view of pointness. You know, I'm talking here in pointness. I'm obviously not talking in pointlessness. I'm talking from pointness, viewing pointlessness, which maybe, isn't quite infinitely less intense than being pointlessness. But I'm saying, for practical purposes, that that the experience, our normal experience, is one thing and reality another. Though, of course, the dichotomy here is impossible. You can't dichotomize, in truth. You can't divide. You can only divide when we're dealing with consciousness in illusion. But you can't divide when we're dealing with being in reality. In being, in reality, no division. With consciousness in illusion, division. And others. Really, none-otherness prevails forever. Now. None-otherness now. Another mantra, right? None-otherness now. N-O-N. N-O-N. None-otherness now. I like that. I like magical words that are evocative and can induce in my presently limited consciousness some intimation of something other in the none-otherness. It'll all be paradoxical before we're finished here. And the only thing that will remain is not to talk about it, but to be it. So, can we truly say, in fact, that the utterly maximal is forever now? That's another term, the utterly maximal. Well, the ultimate infinitesimal is the utterly minimal, but the utterly maximal is the utterly minimal. Can we truly say, in fact, that the utterly maximal is forever now? In the absolute now, nothing that could be is not. That is ever absent. Nothing that could be, and that is infinitudinous infinity of possibilities, is not, or is ever absent, both in terms of self-objectification and in terms of essence. The essence of all that could be is ever homogeneously exactly what it is. And do we have these simultaneous, absolutely infinite number of self-objectifications, which are not real but actual, all proceeding now? All that ever could be is really consummated now. I've said that before. In the now is forever, in the now is ever. I like to repeat that, I guess, so that it makes its way into apprehensibility, into realization. Realization on the fifth plane of the atmic plane. Realization. My old teacher used to say, seeing with real eyes. He made it simple. And I, too, am capable of making things simple now and then. It's all thou art that. That's it. Thou art that. In the beginning of the infinitization book, that's what I wrote. I said, all of this is based on one sentence, thou art that. And maybe even those 3 words are 3 too many. So time never passes. This is kind of a little summary here. Time never passes. The past is really forever non-existent, as is the future. Well, maybe I should say non-real, as is the future. Space is a self-perception, and perhaps ultimately, in full caps, a self-perception, if such is possible in the state of that. And I shouldn't be using the word state, because it implies that there can be different states, so this is some ultimatized state. The past is really forever non-real, as is the future. Space is a self-perception, perhaps ultimately a self-perception. Extension is not real, but can be reduced to a true point. That's kind of a summary, right? Time and space are illusory self-objectifications, and yes, essentially are the absolute infinitude itself. Absolute infinitude itself. The absolute now has no duration. The absoluteness, infinitessentiality, ultimatization is. And DK says it much more elegantly, God is. That's a little summary. And sometimes in summaries, it helps to gather together a lot of the loose ends, you know. Apparent finitude arises out of immutable absoluteness, infinitessentiality, ultimatization, and apparent finitude, I want to say apparently, arises, and yet there is never any real change. Remember, going back, all this disexistence disappears, yet all for A remains. Unchangeably, immutably the same. So there's never any real change. In the changeless, non-durational now, nothing can really change, even though change, which is an actuality in consciousness, seems real. So, you know, with Shankara, Maya is forever. And there are moments in apparent time when we, the extensions of the non-myopic, are relieved of the perception of Maya. But then there is the reality of us which is not in Maya forever. And when do we know that? Well, only when we're relieved from the Mahamaya. And we say, oh, all along, I've been that which is not myopic. Even though that which is myopic is essentially the real. So apparent change is but self-objectification, the self-objectification of all possibilities which have been forever consummated in absoluteness, infinitessentiality, ultimization in the absolute now. Apparent change is simultaneous self-objectification of an infinitude of possibilities which have been forever consummated. But somehow it has been arranged that the experience of sequence exists within the non-sequential. The experience of sequence exists within the non-sequential. How then, as a human being, i.e. as a true point, within one's universal true point, and really within the one ultimate true point, how then should the human being live the necessary and ever-existent illusion? How then to live that as one should live it? So this involves the morality, and it shows us why Spinoza began really big, but worked his way right down to the ethics of how to behave with each other in our illusory state. How then, as a human being, i.e. as a true point within one's universal true point, and really within one's ultimate true point, should one live the necessary and ever-existent illusion as one should live it? I did give some, in the Infinitization book, I gave some practical advice, which I wish I could follow, how to live this way. Our task in universe, expressed from the human perspective and under the spell of finitude, S-O-F, U-T-S-O-F. I'm going to like that, you know, if I may. U-T-S-O-F, under the spell of finitude, because I think that really is a descriptive phrase. So how then do we fulfill this task, our task in universe, expressed from the human perspective under the spell of finitude? Our task in universe is ever to realize ever-increasing intensities of absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization, within an ascending series of true points, or greater and greater wholes, which are the universal true point, and finally the one ultimate true point. I'm saying that's our task in universe, you know. Mayor Baba, when he woke up after 30 years, or returned after 30 years of silence, he said, "Don't worry, be happy." He was using the simple approach. And I'm saying that this is our task. Our task in universe, expressed from the human perspective and under the spell of finitude. Oh, I've got to change that. I'm so sorry. Under the spell. Okay. Under the spell of finitude. I'm going to change this. U-T-S-O-F. Because I want to capitalize finitude, because it reminds me of the universe. U-T-S-O-F, under the spell of finitude. I'm sorry for the interruption. Our task in universe is to realize ever-increasing intensities of absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization, within an ascending series of true points. Because, you know, right now, we identify as the man, identify as the group, identify as the hierarchy, as the planet, as the sun, as the cosmic logos, as the galaxy. All of these ring past knots as our monad, as that which we are is retracted into itself. We will expand our identifications, and that's what I call an ascending series of true points. So, ever-increasing intensities of reality. Pointlessness prevails now. It does. Forever. Now as forever. Now as ever. Pointness, though hypothetically eternal in now. I'm saying that's a hypothesis, and I'm trying to get away from that, you know, pointless point, trying to get away from that a little bit, even though it's an experiential reality. Pointlessness prevails now, and pointness, though hypothetically eternal now, is a necessary though illusory finitude. Well, in a way, let's put it like this, it's an experiential finitude, but it is it, as we know. So we call it a necessary, though illusory finitude, which seems to be sequential, that is, seems to be something other than absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization, but is exactly the same. I.e., the same, essentially. And I'm going to, well, I guess what I should do is really, essentially. So, pointness contains these finitudes called universes, but there are so many of them, perhaps there's a simultaneous infinite number of them. So the many, many finitudes of universes make maybe one complete self-objectification. But that would require including the universes of the future, which seems counterintuitive, but as we look forward to the universe of the future, however that universe works out has already been actualized, realized within the one and only, perpetual consummation. Can we live the apparent externality of seemingly sequential self as self-objectification, self-objectifications? Can we live the apparent externality? We're out here, we're not having the experience of the absolute one and only forever. Apparent externality of the seemingly sequential self as self. Well, when I use just capital one, capital I mean the self with is the point, the one universal true point, or a universal true point, any true point really. But let's just say the universal true point, and self, by self I mean absoluteness. So I call self as self. It shows that the self with a capital S is really absolutely the absolute self. So can we live the apparent externality of seemingly sequential self as self objectifications while abiding, now as forever, now as ever, in, or should I say, as the ultimate interiority of absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization? I can't really say can we be in two places at the same time, or can we be in two times at the same time, but you get the idea. Can we be reality and illusion simultaneously? Well, we can't help but be, really. Can't help it, but do we know it? Can we be reality and illusion simultaneously? And I have to say, well, inevitably, really, but not inevitably in terms of consciousness. In terms of consciousness. Yet, from the perspective of the great seeming, well, this is true. I mean, we inevitably live as reality and illusion. But from the perspective of the great seeming, which is the great illusion, which is what we perceive when we are being in universe, as it were, maybe not. From the beingness of the absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimization, indeed, always so in the absolute now. So it doesn't seem like we can do this when we're just in this world, that we can be at the full intensity of absoluteness now, and yet be the world of illusion, and in the world of illusion. It seems like we can't do it, but in fact, we're always doing it, being it. From the perspective of the great seeming, maybe not. I mean, people say, oh, well, I've realized ultimate reality. Well, okay, But I always have to ask, what is that true point, which is the Solar Logos saying about that? Is his realization of ultimate reality the same as ours, this tiny emanative point which we are? And is his the same as that of a galactic Logos? Because hierarchy in the world of illusion does exist, I do believe. And remember, I'm using the word illusion in a very full sense, meaning the whole universe, or the apprehension of the great breath, still illusion in a way. I'm not using illusion as meaning the correction of the faulty ways the human being has of thinking. So, you're no longer thinking in an illusory manner, you're thinking without illusion, but that's a very low special case of what I mean by illusion. All is illusion, O dweller in the shadows. I realize this sequence of thoughts about non-sequential, non-durational being is but a seed which needs to be developed or perhaps refuted. I have been impelled to present this sequence in illusion. Well, that's what these points are, these 144 points. I have been impelled to present this sequence in illusion in the hope of achieving a greater degree of understanding of the science of being. Obviously I don't want to get caught in a lot of words and just forever have words running around my head. I, the little emanation here, want this experience. I want to live in this experience. So do you. So do we all as tiny points within the one universal point and finally the one ultimate point. But to each type of point, its level of registration and its level of intensity. You can't put ultimate intensity in a lower point of tension or you blow up that lower point of tension, right? So I realize that the terminology may be relatively new here, even to those who have made a fair attempt to understand infinitization of selfhood. Probably there are seeds of this kind of thought, but I'm developing it more systematically here. In infinitization, some of these thoughts were there, yes, but the emphasis is here on simultaneity, and I think in infinitization I could say the emphasis was on endless sequence. So maybe I'm kind of self-correcting here a bit. Ultimately, all in universe lives on the cross of simultaneity, sequentiality. In the ultimate state, simultaneity ever prevails in the ultimate eternal now. Because, I differentiated between nows in the other book, ultimate eternal now. In universe, which is the same thing as saying in illusion, time, space, sequentiality, and extension seem forever to prevail when there is a universe, and maybe there always in the eternal now is, though not in the perception of sequentiality, then there's not always a universe. Both must be lived. Simultaneity and sequentiality, both must be lived, it seems, forever and yet eternally now. Both simultaneity and sequentiality. I suggest the heart for that. Something about the heart when it opens, when it's alive, when it's coming in touch with the registration, it can, I feel it can, begin to reconcile simultaneity and sequentiality. Absoluteness, infinitessentiality, ultimatization, and Mahamaya are now as forever, now as ever, married to each other, as are Brahma, Brahman, and Samsara. They're not only married as two, but, married as one. The two become one. The two are forever one. They are one, and yet experientially are not. At least there will be times, I italicize it because, it's illusory. There will be times when the great truth of their inseparable oneness will be forgotten. For Mahamaya does not always know absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization. It seems that every time it appears, if there are times in which it appears, it has to reestablish the knowing, the being, or reestablish the knowing that it always has been, now, the absoluteness. Certainly even right now in the Mahamaya, you're going to look at certain beings and you just know. The tiny little atom of substance does not know now absoluteness, infinite essentiality, ultimatization, no. But that knowing that forever one has been that being is sequentially reestablished when dealing with the sequence of illusion, and in a way never needs to be established when not dealing with the sequence. Because, well, let's just say, forever, the essence of Mahamaya is exactly the Brahman, the absoluteness. Practically speaking, those who leave must return. Now, what in the world do I mean by that? Well, this has been a big trip, We've gone off on a big journey, apparently. And we have to deal with the very thing that we seem to have left behind in thought. So practically speaking, those who leave must return, though limited by emanatively reduced consciousness. The Mahamaya must be restored to the intended archetype. That's what I mean by improve the illusion, perfect the illusion, archetypalize the illusion. To know that one is absolutely one may help with this restoration. We're busy now practically archetypalizing all the contents of consciousness so that they reflect the divine ideation of any one universal true point. We are fulfilling the intended pattern and being retracted into the beingness of the one universal true point. We're fulfilling the intended design, which of course is a design in illusion, but in another way is absolutely contained within the infinite essence. So we have a job to do right here and now. Nothing will excuse us from it. We'll never escape it. We'll never... The universe is work, universe is activity. At least it is activity in actualization, in the actual world which consciousness reveals. So we all have an immediate task. It's got to be well done. There is a purpose for each one of us. It's rooted finally in the ultimate cosmic purpose of any universal true point. And that's how we spend our time as we're working in space, apparently. But every once in a while, in time, and always, an intimation, always really, an intimation may come to us of this background of simultaneous, homogeneous absoluteness, which we and everything essentially are. It's the no thing against which we live a life involved with many things. And the purpose here is to just help to alter our state of mind in such a way that we can begin to appreciate that which is the substance of all, and is so as if negative to all that occurs, the great positing of things, that we probably never think about it, or rarely so, and think that thinking about it can't be of much good in how we live our life. But maybe it can. That under this premise, that's why I'm talking about these things. In these few hours, I don't know, maybe something like 10 hours discussing these points. Now I know that, in a few days, as I said, what started all this? From the astrological perspective, I'm just 2 days away from an exact Uranus conjunction with my sun. Third time last time in this life. So, Uranus, the planet of simultaneity, and Uranus and Saturn in my chart are together. So, simultaneity and sequence. And maybe that's why I'm dealing with this. In a few days, the conference is coming, and the PIP test has to be perfected or made better. Airplane tickets have to be bought, all kinds of things in the real, so-called real, I call it unreal, but the actual world have to be handled. But okay, just for a little while in time, I'm dealing with the reality of the simultaneous timelessness, and hoping that something about that registration makes a fuller impression on my own consciousness for having attempted to share this with you, and also a fuller impression on your consciousness if you are interested, and translate it into your own words. Do whatever you want. I mean, the realization is the realization. The words to approach it may be useful, but they're not ultimately important, so you'll have your own way. Well, I have jottings in my little red book, right? Keep changing colors between red and black. Harder to get hold of red. And to help apply this practically, I may, from time to time, amplify a little bit on these jottings. There's over 1,000 of them right here, right now. But I think I'll keep on trying to refine my thought about this, about what I presented. And say, oh, did I say that? Refine some of this presentation so it's a little sharper, and maybe there's fewer ambiguities, but we are in the area of ambiguity and paradox. It's really hard to avoid that. And maybe I'll be able to go further with it. I don't know. I intend to write a sort of a video book on the egoic lotus, and one on physiognomy, very concrete kind of thing. And there's plenty other in the old commentary from Mastery Decay I want to talk about. But for the moment, I have presented this for your consideration, and let's see what we can do with it. We can't help be it. No choice. Being is being, and we are that. Forever now. But what we do in actuality, even though it's all forever in a way foreseen and forebeen, that's a good one. Oh, I like that one. All is forebeen. being. Oh, goodness. All is for being, all is foreseen. I haven't used that one before. These little magical words, they help me get different angles on things, and maybe they will be useful to you in getting some different angles that may open up a flash of realization. So this has probably been the longest program. It's already almost 3.5 hours. What I will do, however, is being very practical. Let us end this with the great invocation. Because after all, whatever we may realize has to be applied in this world of actuality, which has to be improved according to the archetype. So we must archetypalize the contents of consciousness, archetypalize the presentation which we encounter. And right now our archetypalization on this little planet involves the externalization of the hierarchy and the reappearance of the Christ. That's our immediate task. And if the background of simultaneous essential being helps with this project and with the bringing of light, love, and power to our fellow human beings, then it will have some value. So let's do this, okay? From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Okay, friends. Those of you who have reached this point, I thank you for enduring this, and if some extraction of the essential points can be made here, then that will all be for the good. So, see you. All the best. Forever now. See you before long. And always. Bye-bye.